What's up, y'all? Welcome back to my YouTube channel at Healing Out Lao'd, where I talk about all things Lao, mental health and wellness, and of course, my personal journey as it relates to healing. If you haven't liked this video yet, please do so right now. It takes like 2 seconds. And of course, subscribe to this channel. That is one of the best ways to raise awareness of this content and so that it goes where it needs to go. Y'all, trying to make sure we do it big for my community, the Lao and Greater Southeast Asian diaspora. Thank you so much for joining me for today's topic. I am exploring a simple but important question, and that is related to imposter syndrome. So what is imposter syndrome? How did I overcome it? And what are the steps that I took to create the life that I live today? So I won't get into too much detail about the steps of creating what life that I live today, but this is more of a reflection of my personal journey when it comes to reflecting on imposter syndrome, as there's a lot of Lao folks that could be wondering, how do I do what I do? How do I do what she does? And I'm not saying you got to do the exact copy of what I do, but this is mainly for you to get an idea of how it can be done. And first, I wanted to go over what is imposter syndrome? Where did it come from? And how has it now been widely used, or why is it widely used? My understanding of imposter syndrome was that it is a term to describe white women's experiences of when they first enter the workforce, where it was dominated by men, cisgender men. And that was either in corporate America or medical fields. But if you think about gender roles and men being the providers, women being the nurturers, there wasn't a lot of women and working in general. And so when they did work in spaces where it was dominated by men, they would feel literally like an imposter, literally like my opinion isn't as valued or been given as importance as your opinion as a man. And if I share an opinion and then you go and share the same opinion, you're going to be heard and not me. And so that's where it came from. But now it is widely adapted to talk about other intersectional identities when it comes to minority identity groups being in spaces where they don't belong. And I wanted to share about being Lao American and how that already puts me in a place where you are a minority within a minority group. And because of that, it feels like my whole life is an imposter, that I'm not even supposed to exist. Even thinking about how we came here, we weren't supposed to be here. My parents met because of a war that happened, the secret civil war that happened in Laos, where my dad escaped Laos, met my mom in Thailand, and they escaped together to come to live in the United States. And if it wasn't because of the war, I wouldn't have been born. So my whole existence shouldn't even be here. But you know what? We out here and we are our ancestors' wildest dreams. So get at us. Anyways, back to the program. So being Lao American is such a contrasting identity in itself, but here we are navigating the complexities of this experience. And at an early age, I had to learn that being Lao wasn't normal. I grew up in a predominantly white community where my family was one out of 5 Lao American families within a 20-mile radius. And I had to learn that people aren't going to know about Lao people and Lao culture because of misinformation, because of the lack of education, because we actually have been hidden under a secret civil war. And the big lesson I learned was just because we are a minority group doesn't mean we have to settle for less or that we can't have or want more for our community. So I had to change and pivot my mindset when it comes to being Lao American and how it was my pride and my joy that I get to share about my culture and my experiences, while also acknowledging the oppressive institutions that don't allow it to be as mainstream as, let's say, East Asian cultures or other Southeast Asian identity groups. We still existed in this nuance of being loud and proud in the United States, that we could be Lao American. But outside of the home, I didn't realize that it would be so in your face that you are not white, that my Lao-ness would be a little bit more enunciated. But growing up, I did try to hide a lot of my Lao identity when it comes to trying to fit in, because I didn't find that sense of belonging at school. So that was K through 12. And then when I went to college, again, I don't see a lot of fellow Lao Americans in higher education. So imposter syndrome kind of carried throughout. But because I had this fighter mentality of resistance to oppression, that I naturally wanted to seek out more resources for Lao Americans. That's just my very specific experience, because I was raised under my dad being a political refugee, and he was there fighting. So it's in our blood to fight. Even if we are in spaces that we're not going to see a lot of Lao people, we are going to be more loud and proud. We're going to rebel even more. And another thing that I learned, but it wasn't until like came to Los Angeles from North Carolina and met incredible mentors, femtors, was I heard this from a big sis Kulap, that other people's opinions are none of your business. And I slowly but surely adapted that phrase to help me understand that not everything needs another person's permission before you enact it. You don't really need to listen to everybody, and that's okay. And other people's opinions are projections of themselves or their own experiences onto you, but that doesn't mean that you're going to have that similar experience as them. So that's something I had to learn over time in order to be more empowered in myself and my voice. For example, with Healing Out Lao'd, there was a whole year where I was just pondering about it. I was doubting myself whether or not I was ready or equipped to lead mental health initiatives for and by the Lao diaspora. And it wasn't until I started hearing more stories about the more it's needed, and also getting more comfortable with my skill sets as a social worker, as someone who is a critical race studies scholar, Asian American studies scholar. I had to wake up one day and put on the hat of being that person that I needed when I grew up. And I'm still growing up, but yes, I had to be that person for my inner child. And it wasn't until I listened to that statement that Kulap shared about other people's opinions, they really aren't of value to you unless there's people that are really trying to support you, really trying to hear you out. And this doesn't mean that you don't take any accountability for harm or that you dismiss folks, but you pick and choose what is relevant to you and what you truly believe in. And you're also able to hold yourself accountable given other people's feedback as well. So I learned over my time at Healing Out Lao'd and doing this work in the community that it is actually some of the most important work, because this is deep healing work that a lot of us are in charge of doing for our own sake, but also for our community's sake. So we don't have to tie ourselves to trauma and that narrative of being only children or refugees, that we can be so much more than what other people project onto us. I grew up with the mindset that I could resist and fight for the greater good. And that comes with, sometimes other people's opinions aren't going to matter, and that you're going to have to, at the end of the day, live with the consequences of your choice. And that's something I had to accept. What is mine versus what is theirs? How do I give back what is not mine to keep? So that's all of what I'll share about that. And then finally, in reflecting about imposter syndrome a lot of times have to do with not feeling enough. Your voice isn't enough. What you're doing is not enough. You're just not enough. And I grew up in a household where I was criticized for not being able to wash the dishes correctly, for not sweeping the floor and getting all the dusty spots, and not being able to cook. And I was like, well, what if I don't want to cook? What if I'm the one who is bringing home the money? So that's in the context of the traditional gender role of a woman being in the kitchen. And I did not realize that evolved into a narrative that just everything I did wasn't enough. So then I would overdo stuff, whether that's, overdoing in my higher education career, overdo it when it comes to different tasks that I was assigned by other people, or just overdoing it when it comes to people not understanding where I come from, so that I'm over explaining myself. I was just overcompensating because at the end of the day, I didn't think and I didn't feel like I was enough. So I had to really learn how to see myself as enough. And that comes with a lot of coaching, a lot of practicing, a lot of nurturing myself back into good health. And when I say myself, I mean my spiritual self, my mental self, my emotional self, all my different selves. And when I did not feel like I was enough, I realized one day that if I am just enough for myself, then how can that be a good thing? How can that be something that is enough for me? That I can love myself in the ways that I haven't been traditionally loved, haven't been traditionally nurtured, and that I can feel seen, understood, and heard by me. So when I can take the overcompensation out of the equation, that it also doesn't mean I'm settling for less, but I am completely enough and I can strive for more. And I don't need to feel heard, understood, and seen by other people as much as I need it from myself. And if I could feel that for myself, then I can truly overcome being in spaces that I don't feel like I'm enough and still affirm myself and navigate it in a way that I think is going to be helpful for me. And the last thing I'll say about imposter syndrome is how does it get contained by being able to accept that other people aren't always going to understand you. There's going to be 1,000 misperceptions of you. And if you are one of them, then that could lead to more negative self-talk and spiraling, and then you not doing what you want to do. But something that my dad taught me, and it's a Lao phrase, and it goes, "Painam kan, papainam kan." And I think what this is illustrating is that, hey, you want to connect with folks, you want to go with them, but you don't always have to go with them. Like you can still do your own thing. And just because the crowd wants to do one thing doesn't mean you have to go their way. And this is about choosing you at the end of the day. It's hard when you're in a collectivist culture because you want to do what folks want to do. You want to make sure that everyone in the group maintains harmony and is able to find unity. But rarely do we talk about the importance of difference and differences of opinions, of lifestyles, of the way that we see the world. And that's okay. How we see the world is not always how other people see it. It's also how we decide to see it. And it's about being there for yourself, to reassure yourself when things aren't going the way that you want them to go. But at the end of the day, you love yourself enough to walk away when something doesn't serve you. So that's something that I had to learn, was leaving certain communities, certain groups, certain friends that, I thought were there for me, but in actuality, they were projecting their own insecurities of themselves onto me, which meant that I couldn't do what I needed to do in order to better my community in a way that I believe is one of the best ways to do it in. And so this is my way of giving back to the community by actually modeling to everyone here that we can do the things that we have always wanted to do. It's just that sometimes we got to listen to that little voice inside our heads that tells us that we are enough and that we can do it. And even if we fail, that it's completely okay. And that's a lesson learned. That it's not a failure when you actually learned a lesson. And so that's all I have to say today for imposter syndrome. And I hope that if there's anything that you take away, is that you are incredibly powerful by being who you are. You don't need to go with the status quo. And quite frankly, you also don't always need to rebel or fight. You can also have this quiet confidence and be a leader in that sense with whatever you want to do. And that people's projections are literally nothing to do with you. That you have your own life to live. And whether that's your parents projecting on you, your friends projecting on you, teachers or professors. You do you, boo boo. So that's in short and in summation, you do you, boo boo. So thank you so much for joining in and listening to me reflect today on imposter syndrome and all the different things that it comes with. And if you got a takeaway from this reflection episode, please share what it was in the comments. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe. Let me know about future mental health topics or whatever topic in general you would like to see me talk about. Much love, hakpeng, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.